It's on.
Okay, my friends, thank you so much. For those of you who are new, thank you and welcome. And for those of you who keep showing up every single Wednesday, welcome back. Thrilled to see you, David Scott especially. I always like to see your face. You were just such a bright light. This morning we are going into top of mind things again, issues about economic recovery, new payroll protection plan updates, and protecting business assets. Ground rules, of course, please stay muted and use that so that we can prevent transmitting background noise. I have 3 dogs who will always pop off at a moment's notice and start singing, and it's howling like crazy. Also, we have our chat open. If you have questions, please submit it via the chat. We also have a hand raise that you can access. And if you want to join in and add a comment, especially, you know, you guys, the contractors here, the members here this morning, you're experiencing a lot of things that, you know, we want to share with one another. And of course, the forum is being recorded. I'm going to turn it over to Paul now, who's going to talk about the learning objective and what we hope to do this morning. Take it away.
Thank you, Deb.
Paul.
Good morning, everybody. And it looks like we've got another good session in. We thank everybody for chiming in. It seems to be serving as a value add, so that's great news. Let's keep that going. So really, the focus of these meetings have been kind of just, you know, what are the hot topics? You know, what are some of the strategies that have been put into place? You know, as new norms, we've really had to change up a lot of things on how we do our business. So what are some of the things that you've learned? Best practices, once again, forward thinking, you know, as we start going through these different phases of reopening, and the conversation now is maybe opening up too fast. Who knows? You know, it seems like we're constantly questioning what's going on, and so I think ultimately we're just trying to be as safe as possible and adhere to the protocols that are out there. So how are you dealing with those? And not only that, you know, we were trying to bring in these subject matters each week. What do you need from IEC Rocky Mountain? Okay, what resource are you trying to find when it comes to maybe a situation you're dealing with internally? So please let us know, and we're going to try and find a subject matter expert on that and get those questions answered. So having said that, I want to say good morning once again. Thank you for tuning in. Same time, same channel next week, so please join in on that. We will get you updates and send out today's communications. So please get involved. Let's get some dialogue going. Hit that chat box so that we can ensure that, you know, if you're unable to speak on the phone or something like that, and you're able to just type, we want to hear what your questions are. So good morning, and I'm going to pass it on over to Marilyn Stansbury, IECRM CEO. She's got a few words for you all. So good morning once again.
Good morning. Every week during these member forums, I have had the opportunity not only to say welcome, but to introduce the subject matter experts and panelists that we have joining us on the call for whatever is top of mind in this particular week. And today we are joined again by Kristin White, who is an attorney at law with Fisher & Phillips. Kristin, I said this last week, has just been an amazing resource to our association, to many of you individually, and to us as a group throughout this experience. She has been able to stay current on whatever the flavor of the day has been throughout this pandemic, whether it's been OSHA and safety and workplace issues, labor and employment issues, financial related to the SBA programs and PPP, and everything in between. And so I'm really excited to hear what is top of mind for Kristin this week. Also joining us today is Herb Phelps. Herb is a former member of the IECRM Board of Directors and is the current co-chair of the Government Relations Committee. Herb is with Network Insurance, and Herb and I had a fantastic conversation last week about all the various things that are happening from an insurance perspective. For those of you that were on just a few minutes before the call started, everyone is incredibly busy in varying ways and in ways we never could have imagined. So we're excited to hear from Herb today on the things that are impacting not only the insurance industry, but Herb's clients and customers throughout the construction industry and beyond. Also, we have a tag team today from BOK Financial. We have Greg Atkinson, who's the Senior Vice President and Market Manager, and Brian Connor, who's the Senior Vice President of Business Banking Relationships. Greg and Brian have been very helpful specifically to IEC, that is who we bank with, but also in a number of other ways related to PPP, just related to the business of the business. And I heard one of their chief investment officer a couple of weeks ago do an update on the economy and market recovery. And I wanted Greg and Brian to join us today to share their thoughts and perspectives from a banking view. And then finally, we normally have a contractor that kicks us off with their top of mind, but I'm going to change it up a little bit today and go back to something that we did on our very first member forum. And that was for all the contractors that are on the call, we went around the room and said, how are you really? What's going on with you as a contractor based on your size of business, based on your type of work? We want to hear from you today. Once we've heard from our subject matter experts on their top of mind issues, we want each of you to have an opportunity to say, this is what's top of mind for me, whether that be something that you share informationally or a question for one of our panelists or anyone else on the call. So I'm going to ask Deb to get us started and hear from our panelists this morning. Thank you all for being on the call.
Thanks, Marilyn. Very important what Marilyn just said about any of you who would like to share, use the raise your hands or chat feature and submit that you want to say something, join the conversation, have something to add, because we're all experiencing new and different things in these circumstances. I'm going to start with Kristin, since she's kind of our old hand here and comes every single week and is so incredibly valuable to us. Kristin, what is on your mind these days? What's top of mind? I know we want to talk about economic recovery, what's new with the PPP, getting back to business and protecting assets. What are you hearing? What are you thinking, feeling? So important for us to know that.
Yeah, thanks, Deb, and thanks, Marilyn. Thanks for having me each week. It's been great meeting with you all each week. Top of mind for us this week has really been return to work plans. And I know for all of you with being to work, that sounds like an odd term, but with the public health order that came out a week or two ago, I lose track of time. It's been amended twice since then. And so, for us, it's been keeping track of that because, we have what we call CDC guidance, but now we have our Colorado public health order that makes a lot of mandates, both for essential and non-essential workers. So that was one of the things I think that maybe surprised construction is that when the public health order came out, you all had been operating under a set of guidelines for quite a while. And the public health order said, no, here's all the requirements and it applies to everyone. So the two most recent changes, just make sure everyone's aware of that, is, for the temperature taking on site, they've now made it where you can have individuals take, their temperature and do a self-assessment at home and then report that. So some of the questions we get, is, okay, what are we doing with that information? And that's, are we going to have them take it and report it? And how are they going to report it? And then what are we going to do with that information? Because if we are taking down people's symptoms or temperatures, that's medical information that then you've got to store like private medical information for an employee. So, employers are having to think about, are we just going to have them do a yes or no clearance, which I talked to some construction companies. They're having employees take it at home, but when they come in, they have to answer the questions and then they hit a yes or no, one of those QR codes that they scan with their phone when they enter the job site. So people are getting creative. Client yesterday, they're doing infrared cameras. So that way when you walk in, it reads you, and you can just keep walking in. There's no line. So like people are getting creative. The other change that we saw come out in the second amended public health order is that return to work protocols, if someone gets sick with COVID, has been for a month or two now, 7 days without symptoms, or 7 days since symptoms first started, 3 days without fever, without meds. The public health order moved that 7 days to 10 days. And that just happened, hit like 3 or 4 days ago. So now in Colorado, the return to work is 10 days since your symptoms first appeared, 3 days without fever, without meds. So that's really what's been top of mind for us, is that, luckily we're a team, at my office. And so someone hears this and they circulate it. So we all know, and we all know to change the guidance. But I had a client I was talking to at 3 o'clock yesterday, and then about the 7 days, and then at 5 o'clock I send her an email and say, okay, as we talked about, this changes, now we're at 10 days. So it's just been a matter of staying on top of all of that. So as we talked about, we try to keep it on our homepage, on our website, and keep the updates. But yeah, people have questions, I'm happy to talk about that, even as the weeks go on, because this changes so rapidly. We're all just trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, it does. It changes amazingly rapidly, and none of us have ever done this before. Mm-hmm. So we are inventing as we go and trying to do the best that we can and adapt to all breaking new information. Herb, what's top of mind for you? And welcome. It's good to see you this morning.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you. Top of mind for me, I just wanted to touch base on 3 things. The first one is that I wanted people to know that you can make changes to your insurance policy if you're down for slow time to kind of save some premium in the meantime. I do have some of my clients who are they're adjusting their payrolls down on their workers' compensation and general liability. They're deleting equipment from inland marine policies if it's not being used. And some, because they're not using all their vehicles, are parking some of the vehicles. You can totally take a vehicle off the policy, or you can just remove the liability, medical payments, uninsured motorist, and collision coverage, and keep comprehensive, which would cover it for theft, fire, hail, those types of things. So you can make some changes to your policies to bring your monthly premiums down. The second one is workers' compensation. The NCCI, National Council on Compensation Insurance, actually at the end of April announced that they are proposing a change that Pinnacle has already adopted. And the changes, they've added a class code, they've changed their rules. Now, if you have employees who stay at home and are not working but are still being paid, you can actually separate that payroll out at audit time, and you can use class code 0012, which is specifically for COVID-19 related payroll for people not working. So at the end of the year, end of your policy year, use that class code, assign that payroll to that class code, and you will not be charged on your workers' compensation. So that should be approved officially within the next couple of weeks. But like I said, Pinnacle has already adopted it. Some of the other carriers are saying they're going to adopt it. So I think that that's something that's important to know.
Herb, how does that, I'm sorry, I know you have a third point, but does that have any kind of conflict with the PPP?
Actually, it does not, because the PPP just asks that you continue to pay the employees and keep them on payroll. Okay. All this affects is your workers' compensation premium. So that can for some people, some of my customers have employees they've been paying for like 3 weeks, and that payroll will reduce their premium at the end of the year. So yeah, that's all it affects. Okay. The third point is actually we're seeing a lot of computer fraud activity, and we've been told that hackers from foreign countries are really trying to take advantage of this situation where employees are working from home, and the employees may lack the firewalls, the antivirus software, and kind of the controls that the employer may have on the computers in the office. So be on the lookout for phishing attacks. I know that personally, and within the office, we've been comparing notes. We are receiving a lot more. I used to get 2 or 3 phishing emails a week, and now I get 2 or 3 per day. So we really are watching out. So just remind employees to practice best practices for computer use, be on the lookout for email scams, and for clients who don't have, for people who don't have insurance coverage for cyber extortion, cyber theft, cyber liability, talk to your insurance agent and you know, see what it's going to cost you and what the benefits are. I can tell you personally, we have a new carrier. Things are changing in that market really quickly. We have a new carrier that partners with clients, and the carrier actually goes in and searches the dark web for information on our clients, and they have come up with emails that have been hacked, or email passwords and IDs that have been hacked and are floating around on the dark web. So there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't really understand. And if you can get some guidance, like I said, we have a carrier that actually goes in and is proactive to protect the insured. So talk to your agent.
Yeah, I don't even know how to go to the dark web. Does anybody here know how to go to the dark web? That's scary stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there are people who can, and so, you know, seek those out. We can help you if you talk to your agent. Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay. Awesome, Herb. Thank you. I'd like to now ask Greg and Brian. Greg, wow, how about you go first, and let's talk a little bit about what you're thinking about this week. Is Greg with
good
us?
morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so in terms of top of mind, you know, we continue to struggle as a bank with all of the same issues in terms of having our employees return to work. We are basically on an 80-20 split in terms of folks working remotely versus those working in the office. And so we are still working on a plan in terms of how and when we can bring the majority of our workforce back into the office. But in terms of the PPP loan process, we're pretty much through the loan phase of the PPP loans. I think, you know, our volumes on those have pretty much dropped off the table. There is still PPP funding available out there, but we're just not seeing much in the way of new applications for those proceeds.
So even though you have the most recent phase of stimulus, you guys are pretty much through it, or you don't see that you're going to be issuing any more PPPs?
We're not seeing new applications coming in. Okay. So we've been able to get nearly all of our clients who qualified for it, the PPP funding that they wanted. And we're just not seeing much in the way of new requests for PPP loans at this point. Okay. But there is still money available through the SBA in that program, and which is good news. So there's still money out there if people have not yet applied. We are waiting for better guidance, I'll say, as it relates to the forgiveness calculations. There is talk right now about potentially extending the 8-week period. There's also talk about the 75%, 25% mix between how the monies are spent, whether, you know, if 75% of the proceeds were spent on payroll expenses, that sort of activates and triggers forgiveness eligibility. And there's, you know, with that rule was not part of the CARES Act. It was actually not part of the law that was passed. It was dropped in later, I think, by the Treasury Secretary. And there's talk about changing that mix, maybe making it a 50-50 split. But we're waiting for guidance on both of those topics. And the banks are putting a ton of pressure on the SBA to provide a formal forgiveness calculator. Lots of folks are asking the banks for a calculator so that businesses can determine, you know, how they should be paying people during that 8-week period, when they should be bringing people back to maximize the amount of the loan that is forgiven. The banks are sort of put in an awkward position because the SBA is asking us not to provide direction on that topic. The SBA is sort of putting that onus and responsibility on the businesses that took the PPP loans. And so, everyone is sort of asking for direction and, clarity on, how the forgiveness calculators and calculations are determined. And so there's lots and lots of questions about that. The banks, as I said, the banks are putting enormous pressure on the SBA to provide a formal calculator so people can know, how much of their loan is going to be forgiven or not forgiven. So stay tuned on that. Hopefully the SBA steps up and provides a calculator, and so that we don't have to interpret their rules. So that would be very helpful. So stay tuned on that. Brian,
that would be helpful. I have one question here from Pete Aiden, who would like to know if you guys are seeing a significant number of people returning the PPP funds.
Yes, I would say that we are seeing a significant amount of funds being returned, but not a significant number of companies returning it. There are a handful
that was
of
confusing. Help us understand that.
Yeah, so companies that took, the SBA came out, this is a few weeks back, and said anyone that took more than a $2 million PPP loan was going to have further scrutiny as to their eligibility for that loan. And so lots of companies, bigger companies, that were concerned about a potential PR backlash for having taken a PPP loan, where there was maybe some ambiguity in terms of whether they really needed it or not. Lots of those companies that are in the public eye did not,
like Harvard University and others.
Right. Yes, exactly. Shake Shack did not want to sustain the PR problem and hold on to the funds. So they were. So those types of companies are returning the monies. But we haven't seen a lot of those occurrences. But the companies that have decided to return those funds were the ones that took some of the larger PPP loans, certainly north of $2 million. So not a lot of companies doing it, but the ones that have were the ones that borrowed a lot of pretty significant dollars under the program.
Brian, what's your perspective?
Pretty much along the lines of Greg, I would say for a lot of our clients, we got them through in round 1 for the PPP. So top of mind is definitely the forgiveness piece, because that within week 7, you can apply for forgiveness, and that's rapidly approaching. I mean, for a lot of our clients, that 7th week is going to be end of May, beginning of June. So you've definitely got that that's on the horizon. I would also mention and reinforce what Herb said. There is a ton of fraud out there across the board. So we are also seeing it all the time right now. So it's one of those to be careful, especially when it comes to PPP. The only person that's going to reach out is going to be your banker on the forgiveness side. Nobody else is going to be reaching out to say, hey, we need this financial information from you. And again, never give out financial information. It's another one. But for us right now, top of mind is moving forward on the forgiveness piece of the PPP.
I even got something this week from my bank on the PPP that wanted my routing number and my bank account number, which they already have. And because I didn't put in new numbers, they came back to me and said my numbers were invalid. So even under the disguise of your own bank, it's happening, I have noted, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything new from PPP or other government programs that should be on our radar for looking ahead, like compliance requirements, documentation, lessons others have already been learning? What is there that we need to be alert to? Brian or Greg?
I think on the forgiveness calculations, I think all of the documentation that folks had to pull together to substantiate the PPP loan amount is probably going to be the same type of documentation that is going to be required for the forgiveness calculation. So I would, in preparation for that phase of the PPP loans, I would, just be ready to pull that stuff together to substantiate how the dollars were spent. And because that's my guess is that exact same type of documentation is what we'll use for the forgiveness piece. But stay tuned as it relates to some of these further clarifications and further guidance on some of these rules, whether it be the 8-week rule or the 75-25 split. There's also a program out there through the SBA called the Main Street Lending Program. We're getting training on it this week. The banks originally, when it first came out, many of the banks, and us included, were not going to participate in the program because it just, between PPP loans and all of the other SBA programs that were out there, it just was not something that we felt was very helpful, frankly, to companies. And so they've modified the program. I think we are going to participate. We are doing training on it this week. It's closer to a regular, what I'll call that SBA 7A type loan. So it is sort of another lending program. It's nothing like the PPP loan, which is more of a grant than a loan, if you will, ultimately. But it is another program. It's going to be a little bit different than the 7A, and probably offer some different tweaks and twists, and may be helpful for some businesses depending upon how it's ultimately structured. But we'll know more about that this week.
Okay. All right. Why don't we talk a little bit about overall economic recovery? The PPP loan infusion is helpful. It has sustained businesses and payrolls during a period of time where they've been shuttered and not able to go to work. So that has helped prevent a certain amount of loss of jobs, but there has been a significant unemployment spike, as well as social and environmental decline. So how can we get our economic engine restarted? What do we have to do? Herb, Kristin, Greg, Brian? Or do we just not actually know yet what we need to do? I'm getting no takers here.
Well,
okay, so Kristin,
right,
you're laughing, so you're audible, so I'm going to call on you.
I was thinking Marilyn had something to add.
yeah, Deb, I was just going to say this is something that one of the reasons that that I wanted Brian and Greg on, but that I also have these questions for contractors right now is, what are people beginning to see now? Just in terms of, again, we talked about this 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago. Is it scary enough? I'm just sort of interested in what are we seeing? Last week we had a couple of contractors share that, they've had some amazing experiences. And I know that I get regular calls for we're still hiring. But I know that that is also not the case for everybody. So I'm just sort of interested in what businesses have had to do or are thinking of. You know, you don't have to share individual company secrets, but just sort of what you're seeing. We heard Jay say at the beginning of the call that, you know, even suppliers and distributors are recovering well right now. But Greg and Brian and I were also just talking about, you know, the overall, what are banks telling their clients and customers, aside from the program loans and other things, but for those that have, you know, they're essential businesses that have continued to do well, but still have had to make changes. What are Greg and Brian seeing from their clients and customers, and what are our contractors seeing?
Go ahead, Greg.
Go ahead, Brian.
I have seen some optimism as we're moving through. I mean, beginning of April, there was a lot of panic, but most people now have been able to start to work through it and have seen that the impact hasn't been as great, especially for a lot of those crucial businesses that have been out there. I mean, our biggest focus when we're talking with our clients is preserving cash. Where are you right now with your liquidity, and that idea of having a good grasp of your cash flow, knowing where that's going to be in the next 90 days, really projecting that out through 2020, having a real good baseline of where are you at right now, and what's a worst case scenario, what's a best case. So you can kind of, and really tracking that on at the minimum on a monthly basis to kind of know where are you at. But at least from my perspective, I've seen more optimism from my clients.
Yeah, and I'll just say it's you know, it's a little bit of a mix. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. You know, companies that are directly affected, those in retail, entertainment, sports, travel, leisure industries, are obviously directly affected, and then companies that are suppliers and vendors or significant suppliers and vendors to those industries are also been affected. But you know, it's a little bit of a bell-shaped curve. You know, we've got, I would say, within our world, you know, we've got 5 or 10% of customers that are really struggling that may not necessarily be directly, they're not retail, they're not necessarily directly affected, but they're maybe one degree of separation away from those industries that are directly affected, and so they're feeling it. We've got the other end of the curve, that 15-20% of businesses that are maybe even benefiting from what's happened, and then we've got everyone in the middle that has been somewhat affected, that are doing okay, that maybe have seen a small decline in revenues, but have also taken steps to reduce expenses, and are, you know, frankly doing fine. You know, it's interesting that as consumer behavior and as consumers, how we spend money and how we do things, and as businesses, how we change how we behave and how we operate. It's interesting that that as we go from doing what we used to be doing to what we are doing now, or what we're going to be doing in the future, there are businesses and industries that are going to just benefit from being at the right place at the right time.
Right.
And what we're sort of advising clients to be thinking about is we're asking clients to think about themselves and their clients. And as their clients and as industries and businesses, when they start doing things differently, when they go from this thing to that thing, that when they start doing something else, it means they've stopped doing something else, and to be positioning themselves at a place where, as behaviors shift, that the businesses are shifting along with those behaviors, or being positioned themselves in a place where they can benefit from that change in behavior, because you know this is a huge sort of catalyst that is changing the way we do things, And some of those
Well, it
changes
is,
are temporary, and some of those changes are permanent. And so we're asking clients to be thinking about themselves and about their clients, and maybe they need to pivot slightly or pivot somewhat to make sure that they don't get left behind as consumer or as business behaviors shift.
Well, pivot is certainly the word of the moment. And actually, I saw a couple of things yesterday as I was reading up on stuff. And when we went through the 2008 recession, hopefully we learned some things that we can apply to today. Do any of the four of you, have any recommendations or thoughts about what those lessons learned mean from 2008 to 2020?
Well, I'll just say it real quick. I think that this is completely different than then, because this situation is actually forcing companies to operate differently. And we don't yet know if some of these changes are permanent or if they're temporary. But these are forcing operational changes that we didn't have in 2008. 2008 was just different. I mean, it was a demand problem, and companies had to right-size expenses, to deal with shrinking demand and shrinking volume, and had to cut expenses. But it wasn't like what we have now. It wasn't where you had many, many industries and many consumers having to behave completely differently than they have in the past.
Yeah.
And so I think there are some lessons in 2008, which is, how do you deal with, shrinking demand? And in your industry, it's about, I think some of the scars from 2008, 9, 10 are about, what happens when, demand drops off and you've got more people bidding on the same work, and how do you cut expenses so that you can bid work at a lower profit margin, and manage through that part of the cycle. But this is just a completely different situation, because it's not necessarily it wasn't a demand issue. It's an operational, just a behavioral change that is happening.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. It is, it's a huge hit. It's not the same, but it still hurts. And everybody is trying to figure out how they behave in this time. So I'd like to kind of segue to Herb and talk a little bit, if I may, about hackers from foreign countries. We're seeing a lot of fraud and hacks. What do you have in the way of advice for protection and mitigation?
I think the first line of defense is just to make sure your employees are watching out for all the different ways that people are trying to get into your computers. It's we get a variety of phishing email scams. Some of them, I forgot who mentioned earlier that they said they received an email that was supposedly from their bank and was asking for their account.
That was me.
Okay, but yes, we are seeing that they're trying to get in by using Google's logo and information, bank's information, credit card information. They're trying
SBA's logo. The SBA logo was even on that particular one that I got.
The SBA, and I personally received several that were supposedly I had missed a phone call, and it was like, they had tied it into our website and saying this is from networkinsurance.com. And so it's all types of things you're going to be bombarded by. So just be on lookout. I would suggest that employers find out from their employees, what do they have as far as safeguards? Do they have a firewall? Do they have antivirus software? Those types of things. Because what the hackers also do is they get into your system and they watch your emails going back and forth between you and employees, between you and vendors, anybody who might there might be a cash transfer going on. And so be very, very careful if you're getting a request for account numbers. If someone's saying, yes, please transfer this money to our account, maybe get a fraudulent invoice, always double check before you send money someplace, or when you're billing someone, to make sure that the person on the other end of the communication is actually who you think it is.
It's really hard to do too, because, you know, we're such trusting souls, and I trust my bank, and I happen to also trust the SBA. And you know, you get something like that. And I was very, very concerned about the fact that my numbers were being told they were invalid. And after like a minute of thinking about it, I thought, man, this can't be legitimate. They're supposed to have my numbers.
Exactly.
And they wanted me to input correct numbers, which I was not going to do. I figured that out very quickly, but I'll tell you, I don't think a lot of people figure that out very quickly. It's hard to do that when you really are getting what you think is a message from a trusted source. So you're saying that the thing is most important is to continue to raise awareness with employees and your people about the fact that this is going on.
Yes, ma'am. And tell them don't trust anybody, unfortunately, right now.
Yeah, right. So let's talk a little more about protecting business assets, because right now the coronavirus is causing a recession that's unavoidable. We are in it. And declining sales, job losses, and much, much more. So what do we do to protect our assets? It hits us hard here. Everything's been hit hard. What kinds of new strategies, especially in the construction sector, should we be considering? Anybody? Kristin, Herb?
Well, I think as far as protecting assets, it goes back to having some sort of cyber coverage added to your insurance portfolio, because they're out to extort, they're out to steal assets, and they're out to go after your employees and customer databases. So, you know, if you get hacked and people are able to get into your accounts and steal personal information from customers and employees, you not only lose those assets, but you also have liability. You need to go back and inform the people. You need to run a forensic check, which can be expensive, to identify exactly when the information was hacked, whose information was taken, and you bear some liability to people whose information was hacked. You have to notify them. You have to pay for 2 years of credit monitoring, and if someone is hacked, you may owe them some money. So just, you know, protect your liabilities and your assets, specifically related to your cyber exposures.
I would love to ask our contractors this morning on the call what you are doing. Leighland? Anybody want to chime in here?
I know we have some top of mind things that our contractors want to know, either from these participants or from each other. So I'd love to hear from a few of you this morning.
This is Leland. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So along the lines of the cyber fraud and the hacking, I mean, that's something that we've dealt with and we've seen with a few different vendors. As mentioned, it is pretty, they're getting pretty smart about how they do it, how they monitor transactions and emails and try to find out who's in accounting, who's not. They've gone as far as making fake invoices for vendors that we use with different bank accounts, wiring instructions, which we normally wouldn't be submitting and processing payment to. The normal safeguards that we have in place for those working from home remain, but I think that the biggest advice that we offer to our employees is that, you know, if we were going to ask you to make a wire transfer or something like that, we'd probably do it in person or over the phone, or, you know, we wouldn't just send an email, or we wouldn't ask anybody to go buy $2,000 in gift cards. So those are the kind of ones to keep away from. Usually when we do get requests for wiring instructions or ACH, I'll double check with that bank and try to check the routing number and accounting number or account number to make sure that it's
That's
to
good.
the company that we're remitting payment to. In most cases, it's like an out-of-state bank or something totally different that's routing around to different areas. But I think the biggest thing is not clicking attachments, OneDrive attachments on emails, certain DocuSign links to click on. They can look very convincing, trying to stay safe from that. So that's one thing that really kind of struck a nerve where I was like, oh yeah, you know, that's something that's really out there. People are trying to find ways to, you know, get other people's money. So try to stay safe out there and keep tech savvy.
So David Jones, how about you? Are you guys doing anything in particular with regard to cybersecurity and
corporately, yeah,
staying safe or anything?
Sonapar's doing a bunch where we are constantly having to sign on to all of our devices, and I mean, even my phone, it's scary if I miss a password 3 times, I'm locked out. So, but in terms of emails and stuff on a daily basis, I've gotten a few recently, and I've noticed that the first red flag is it'll be somebody's name of somebody that I know, but there's no signature. And typically you'll see their signature on their email. So at that point, I'll do that one thing we used to do back in the day of actually calling the person. And, and most of the time you find out, yeah, they've been hacked. So that's
Herb, any thoughts about that, about how to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead,
David. That's okay, but from a corporate standpoint, Sonapar is huge on all their IT stuff. It's a challenge for us to just work from home. So.
Right, but working from home does make us more vulnerable. Herb,
absolutely.
Any other thoughts on that?
No, I believe that pretty much everybody's kind of summed it up nicely.
Okay, all right. I have a question from Tim. He's a little confused on the OSHA reporting requirement for an employee who is suspected of getting COVID from workplace exposure. Kristin, what does Tim need to be thinking about?
So for the OSHA for recording that, the first thing is they've got to have a positive test. So if the employee, you know, is a suspected case, first it's got to be a confirmed positive case in order to even have to start going down the work-related path, if you will. So that's your first step. Second is if that employee ends up testing positive, then you've got to go back and determine, do we have any objective evidence that this was work-related? And I've had a few conversations with some different clients over the last week of what does that look like? Because OSHA's not really putting an investigative, you know, burden on employers. So they're saying, you know, if you get evidence in the normal course of business that this could have been work-related, and they're giving examples of clusters of employees, employees that work closely together, they all come down with it. That would be objective evidence. So if, you know, we've looked at it and said that, you know, if we've got one case in the workplace, to me, you're not going to get objective evidence that that's going to be recordable. But if you end up with, you know, the second or third case and those employees all worked closely together, then we're likely getting closer to that cluster of employees. And then at that point, that second and third possibly become recordable. But, you know, it's a matter of positive case plus that objective evidence piece.
Tim, do you want to share anything with us specifically about this? Tim? Hello, Tim. You're connecting to audio. Okay, good. Let's get you on here. Are you there? I think Tim is having trouble connecting to audio, so let's keep moving. And Tim, if you do connect well, just raise your hand or shoot me a note in the chat. I think this is kind of the scary part, because as we return to work, we're going to increase exposure. So what does recovery need to look like? Guys, anybody? You know, we want to take care of the long-term social and economic as well as environmental steps to ensure that we can get back to work. But we're also going to, by being in each other's company, increase the opportunity for exposure.
Deb,
And Kristin, does that, I mean, that increases incredible liability.
It
right?
does. I mean, that's what I was thinking about is, I mean, really, you know, from the employer perspective, we are going to be together more. It is going to increase exposure. And so it's just a matter of, you know, making sure that you're following what's in, you know, for Colorado, our public health order and the guidelines, because that's going to be your defense, you know, to any of the claims that you're liable, you know, whether it's from workers' comp, which, you know, we just saw California came out this week saying they're going to, you know, Illinois pulled their rule back that we talked about a few weeks ago. California has now come out with a similar rule that if you, you know, are working and you get COVID, they're going to presume work-related for workers' comp purposes. And that's something we may see other states follow. So something to, you know, to just be aware of that, you know, you're going to have to think about it, yeah, from a workers' comp perspective, becomes an OSHA issue, but also just the general liability. You've seen the tort cases that have been filed against employers, and, you know, to sue around workers' comp, especially in Colorado, it's got to be intentional behavior, you know, so that's where you want to make sure you're following those guidelines and you're keeping records of it. So even if we're not keeping employee medical information, we're keeping records that we have checked people coming on our site. And does that mean we're now checking customers, checking other vendors? But, you know, you're being as diligent as you can, because that's the best defense. I mean, Deb, as you mentioned, this is all new territory for everyone. So in the legal world, it's going to be the same. And, you know, no employer wants to be the test case, right? Or be the first case.
Oh, indeed. And do we know anything about the lawsuits that have been filed so far, like with Walmart? No? Anything at all?
And what we know so far is, I mean, just really what's in the allegations, right? Because that's all we can know at this point. And so, you know, it's just been intentional behavior, alleged that the employees were ill, they were not permitted to go home, they were forced to work while they were sick, and that there weren't the precautions. Whether any of that is true, we don't know that, but that is the allegation of it. So that's where, you know, like we say, the best, you know, the best defense here is the good offense, right? So it's just having all those precautions in place to show that you did everything you could and what was recommended.
Yeah, agreed. All right, guys. Well, we just have a few more minutes. Brian, Greg, do you have any parting comments, advice, counsel for this group of wonderful electrical contractors?
Brian, you want to go?
Greg? Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, keep doing what you're doing. You know, our take is that you know, the next you know, few months might be bumpy, but we really believe that we are going to get through this. We're extremely hopeful, and we think that the Colorado economy is, you know, it's already starting to turn back on, and over the coming weeks, it's going to continue to reactivate, and we just remain very positive and hopeful that here over the next, you know, 3 or 4 months that things are going to turn back on, and we will get closer to normal, hopefully, you know, toward the end of the year. But we're very optimistic and hopeful that, you know, the Colorado economy was extremely strong going into this, and we really believe that our economy is going to bounce back quite nicely. So
that's good to hear. Greg, I'm sorry, Brian.
No, I'll just chime in. We were happy to be on the call this morning, and I think it's, you know, it's coming together communities like this that are going to help, especially to be able to ask questions. So we appreciate it, and just hope that everybody stays safe and healthy.
Well, we hope you'll come back, because insight today has been really, really helpful. How about you, Herb?
You know, I really just want to say thank you for the IEC for taking the bull by the horns and doing seminars like this or conferences like this where we can talk about it and share our knowledge and expertise. And I just think it's a really good thing. I thank Marilyn for putting it all together.
Yeah, she's done an awesome job. All of them have. And Kristin, any other you are our perennial guest and subject matter expert, and so I'd love to hear anything else you have in terms of parting advice for the week.
Yeah, I just had a couple things to add on the PPP as we leave. I talked to the head of our SBA kind of task force yesterday, and one of the questions that came up last week was bonuses and pay increases. And
right, that's right, we did talk about that.
Yeah, and as Pete and I both have been saying, oh, we thought we were going to get guidance, now maybe we just aren't going to get that guidance. So the best guidance they've been giving is along those lines is that if it's not something you would normally pay, then don't pay it out of PPP and expect forgiveness. So if these would be normal bonuses that you would be giving at regular amounts, and you can show that's something you've done, then it's likely safe. They can't guarantee to do it. But if this is something out of the ordinary, then that's where you may run into red flags. So that's kind of the it's not great guidance, but the best we've got now. The other one is it was mentioned earlier, I think, by Greg, about the forgiveness loan, a formal forgiveness calculator. So we had our team put together, and I'll send this out, Marilyn, so you can send it to those on the call. Our team has put together a document that walks you through that forgiveness calculator analysis. It's
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, basically, I think they took what was in the law and created this forgiveness calculator in order for you to be able to calculate that yourself. So if you've got questions on it when you're walking through, let me know. I can connect you with someone on our SBA task force. But they have put together that document. Like I said, Marilyn, I'll get that to you so you can put it in the links that go out afterwards, so everyone will have that document.
Excellent.
Super. Thanks, Kristin. Okay,
as always, thanks for having me. It's really great to be here every week.
No, it's awesome to have you. IECRM members, anybody have any parting comments that they'd like to make today? Are y'all cool?
I just had one. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Tim, there you are. We were trying to get you to talk to us earlier.
I know, and I'm new to this Zoom thing, so I'm trying to figure it all out. Okay, I had a quick question. Back to the workman's comp portion. We had a job site that was determined, at least part of it, where my GC, one of his guys later tested positive, and then eventually mine did too, that were working in very close quarters for a full day. That's where I'm a little concerned about it. Perhaps it might be workman's comp related. Any thoughts on
Kristin, you have
that?
any counsel for him on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I always tell people do the analysis separately with workers' comp and OSHA, although in this case, it sounds like it may be similar. But that's where, I would reach out to your carrier, because if they were all working closely together, the issue is can we track who had it first versus who had a second or third? Because I think that's important in the work-related analysis, because we don't know, where that first case came from. So if there's any way to try to track that and then talk to the carrier, because I know up until now the carriers have been taking a pretty hard line about, well, we're not going to assume it's work-related, unless the law changes. But I think that second or third case, that's going to be a hard one not to be work-related. But it's going to be
but if they again, this would just be the GC had one case and we had one case, then if we took the sense it wasn't workman's comp related, then it's technically not an OSHA reportable offense. Is that a safe assumption?
Yes, because if we've determined it's not work related, then we're saying it's not work related, and they must have gotten it, in the community.
Correct.
And that may be where you ask them.
Thank you.
You might ask. Yeah, you might ask.
But Tim, you also Tim, you also asked, though, if it is confirmed and we continue to pay them in full, is it still reportable? I don't know if we covered that yet.
May I interject here? Tim, the most important thing you can do right now is go ahead and file a claim with your workers' compensation carrier and let them sort it out. It sounds as though you have a very strong case that yes, this was work-related. Your employees worked directly with this employee of the general contractor who actually had the virus. Then your employees, multiple, not just one, and it was the employees who worked with that individual who came down with the virus. So it sounds like it is work-related, and your workers' compensation carrier should be informed quickly and help you sort all that out.
Okay, but only one employee was confirmed. And the other, and again, this happened 3 weeks ago or longer. So.
Okay.
Okay. Even though it was only one employee that was confirmed, if that employee had worked with the general contractor's employee who actually had the virus, there's still, it sounds like there's probably a connection there. And I would say get your carrier involved pretty quickly and they can help you sort it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good advice. Mary Ann had a question to everyone, and if people are returning to work as well as going out into the community, how do you define an employee who gets COVID-19 at work? What are the guidelines? Because we're reopening for business, people are going out, they're social distancing, but there still is the opportunity to get the virus.
No, I think that's going to be a really hard one. I think that community spread is going to be, especially if you end up with some hot spots like we had when this first started. It's going to be really hard to determine. I mean, Herb raises a good point. It's a matter of, did somebody have it and then your employee worked with that one, right? It goes to that second or third employee issue to try to get to work relatedness. But I do think it's a matter of talking with your carrier, and having them help you sort that out and having them make the claims and see where it goes on being work related. But yeah, it is. I mean, I think it's going to get harder and harder. As people may tell you, oh, I only come to work. Well, did you go to the grocery store? Is anyone else in your home infected?
Yeah.
You've got some questions you can ask that maybe help you determine, okay, it's not work related, but yeah, it's going to get harder and harder, which is why I think, we talked about here, I think OSHA has raised the bar a little bit from the OSHA perspective on making it recordable with this objective evidence piece.
Mary Ann, do you want to ask anything further on that? No? No? Okay. Then what I'm going to do right now is thank you all. I appreciate everything you have brought to the table this morning, all the contractors who are here, and hand it to Marilyn to wrap us up.
Great. And I have another question before I say goodbye. And this is something that I read yesterday, and it looks like we have a question about it as well. And this is probably maybe Kristin or Greg or Brian. The specific question here are your thoughts about having a payroll date early so that it will fall within the 8 weeks. And something that I read yesterday suggested that employers that have PPP loans consider shifting their payroll cycle in order to fit within that time frame. And Pete, I immediately thought of you as well when I read this yesterday. What's anybody's guidance or thoughts about whether you make adjustments to your normal schedule in order to accommodate this 8-week timeline, or are you just asking yourself for trouble?
Marilyn, I'm happy to try to answer that. I really hesitate with shifting or doing something completely abnormal out of the ordinary course of business. I think that just opens up a lot of risk. I think if you maintain kind of normal operations, which is kind of the overall goal of the loan program, I think that's a much safer bet. I do think, as Kristin kind of mentioned earlier, if you do bonuses or raises or anything out of the ordinary, I think that's just, you're setting yourself up for a lot of risk. The overwhelming question that we still don't have an answer to is this cash versus accrual situation with the PPP loan of, is it
So
really
confusing.
when it actually gets paid, or is it when the cost and expenses are incurred? we continue to hope that we're going to get more guidance on it. I'm starting to get a little pessimistic, but maybe I'm just an accountant, that it's never going to come. It's going to be, hey, this is what I'm submitting and hoping that it goes. And then, you know, the government's going to have hindsight to come back and look. So I think the documentation of it's going to be absolutely critical. So sorry, I know that wasn't a very exact answer, but.
Well, but maybe we need to dive more into that in some following forums. I think that might be, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Brian,
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
sorry to jump in. Did you have something to share along the lines of modification?
I would agree. I mean, I would agree with Pete. We are hoping as we get guidance that it really is that the program, they're trying to keep the program as simple as possible, although it doesn't seem like that. I mean, we are hoping that it's simple to the degree that you're going to, here's what your, you know, here's what my payroll was, or ADP, Insperity can get you a report, and that is what we could submit. But yeah, it's been a little frustrating in that we have to continue to say, that's a great question, but we don't have any guidance yet. So, I mean, we're definitely hoping it's going to be simpler as opposed to more complex on that payroll, because business owner have to do a new payroll run. This is supposed to help, not hinder.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I read it in a recommendation yesterday, and I said, I can't. This doesn't seem real to me, but it, you know, the conflicting information and why calls like this and why relying on those financial and accounting and legal and other experts that you already have relationships with, that those relationships are just even more critical and important right now.
Yeah.
I know we're a little bit past time, and Deb has handed it off to me to close out. So I just want to thank everybody today. And I actually,
Marilyn, I'd like to just say one thing before you go close us out. I would love to ask you, all of you on this Zoom, if you have something that is a burning topic in your mind, please send it to Marilyn. We really want to know what you need more help. And Marilyn, now I hand it back
thanks,
to you.
Deb. So next week's forum will be a continuation of top of mind issues. May 20th, we will gather here again. And if you do have top of mind issues, let me know. We're continuing to call on our partners and our contractors, and based on the things that I've had conversations with people about is how we're putting this agenda together. So if I haven't reached out to you, please reach out to me. I'm thinking next week we're going to bring some of our suppliers and others into the conversation. I thought what Jay had to share before the call started this morning was something that we should probably also begin to expand on as we're talking about following week. And for those of you that had the OSHA questions, the following week on May 27th is our OSHA, our monthly safety forum again. This week, May 27th, we will have someone on to talk about OSHA documentation. A representative from OSHA will be with us. And it's kind of funny, these safety forums that we planned them in August, the year prior to the time that we execute them. And we have been spot on with topics for safety this year. So OSHA documentation was already on the agenda for May. And how perfect for that to be a topic. And in the thought process of pivoting, the first Wednesday in June, we're going to have a special member forum. One of the things that we had to pivot with, that we had to change, was moving our Summit Awards date for Summit Awards event, but also our Summit Awards applications. And we're going to have a conversation the first week of June about employee recognition and industry recognition, and how we can help you think about ways in which you can do that, including applying for a Summit Award, because that deadline will come up at the end of June. So I'm just going to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Paul, for driving us technically behind the scenes, and thank you, Deb, for moderating and facilitating and sharing us with these topics every week.
Yes, thanks
Everybody,
for
have a
joining
great
us.
week. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks all.
Hey, Herb, I'll be in touch
Check
with
it.
you, man.